Hello everyone, my name is Harsh and welcome to the talk Got Cookies, Cookie-Based Authentication Vulnerabilities. It's been a long that we haven't talked, so I hope that you will enjoy this talk, and once again, thank you for attending this talk. So we all got cookies. Whenever we see a web application, an Android application, or any kind of application that is utilizing an authentication and session management, there are multiple ways to basically to authenticate a user or to identify a user's valid session. One of the ways cookies, other can be authentication token, a client certificate, or anything, right? So today we are going to specifically talk about cookies. I often hack cookies whenever I eat cookies. So this is a kind of ironical thing. So a quick introduction about me. I'm a security consultant at Redent Labs and core pentest at Cobalt.io. I'm a lazy bug bounty hunter. So I used to do active bug bounty hunting for like a couple of years now, and right now I am like not that much active into bug bounties, but I still sometimes try to explore things out. I used to be in Buckrout's top 150 hackers. I might be somewhere up and down right now. I have authored multiple books on hacking in the past. I write security blogs on the Medium. You can go and check it out. Maybe you will find something which is useful to you. And I have spoken at the multiple security conferences, even with the Red Team Village before. So once again, thanks to Red Team Village for again inviting me for this talk. And I hope that everybody will enjoy it. So the agenda for today is going to be very simple. This is going to be a very small talk where we are going to talk about my approach towards hacking the cookies, because often I see that people just ignore that endpoint. This is a very big attack surface if you really know what to look for. And obviously the things that I'm going to tell you are not only the things that you can look for. You can obviously use your imagination to go beyond and beyond that thing. So agenda is really simple. We are going to look at introduction to cookies, and further we are going to talk about some vulnerabilities in the cookie-based authentication, some of the real life case studies and scenario where I'll be talking about my experience hacking cookies and cookie-based authentication, and how I was able to find some critical issues, found some really interesting issues with just analyzing the cookies in the right way. Some tips and tricks whenever you encounter the cookies next, and at last the good wrap up. So without any further ado, let's just move in directly to our first part, introduction to cookies. This is a simple little cookie monster, right? I usually eat such cookies, but when you look at the web application, there are cookies. A lot of applications use cookies, and some of you might not be aware like what the cookies are, why they are used. So simply giving an idea about introduction to cookies. Cookies are nothing but a way to track the session. Let's say an application allows a user to log in, right? There's a user called Harsh, there's a user called Harsh B. Now, how you would identify that which user is currently logged in? How would you identify the state of that user? Let's say Harsh A has a bank balance of, let's say, $100 in his account, and Harsh B is having a bank balance of $200 in account. But what if the states are mismatched, and what if Harsh A is basically able to access the $200, right? So that's why to track the session, to identify which user is logged in and when it is logged in, what kind of access that particular user has, the researchers implemented a way called cookies. So cookies basically nothing but a way to first of the foremost task is to make sure that the authentication and kind of tracking the state of the application, whether the user is authenticated, whether the user is having access to a particular thing, whether or not user is allowed to do certain tasks and things like that. Additionally, cookies are also sometimes used to fetch or display something of server side. Sometimes it is used to display the welcome banners. Sometimes cookies are used to control the language transformation for a complete web application. Sometimes cookies are used for just the tracking purpose only, where your goal is nothing just to just like you see the analytics cookies and the tracking cookies, right? So often you see pop-ups with that, or whenever you will see your dev console, you will see the cookies that are using such tracking cookies, application using such tracking cookies, right? So our focus today would be more around the authentication cookies, or the cookies which basically are tracking the state of the application, and the cookies which are basically displaying some data on the application's front end, or the cookies which are basically, you know, getting some data from the application's backend or something like that. And this is where we are going to cover most of our test cases, and there is a lot of test cases around it. This is again going to be a very small talk regarding, because to explain all the things, this is really simple. All you need to have is like identify application which is using cookies, not the auth tokens, bearer tokens, but main activities they are doing through cookies. Obviously, you can look for similar vulnerabilities in the authorization token based or bearer token based application as well, but make sure that whenever you encounter the cookies based authentication next, you use this as a reference so that you can increase your attack surface, or you can get some benefit out of it. Now, whenever I see cookies, a lot of people, what they do is basically they check for a very few things. If cookies are secure or not, let's say there is HTTP only flag set or not, there's a secure flag set or not, so that they can show that, okay, I can steal it via XSS, I can steal it over an unencrypted communication channel. Or sometimes people look at if they are using same site or not, so that if they can see if the CSRF is possible or not. So these are the limited attack vectors when most of the people or most of the beginners do when they look at the cookie based authentications, right? Now, the thing that I'm going to show you next, the mind map that I'm going to show you next, is going to give you a broader concept about what you can basically do when you see a cookie-based authentication. And we are going to look at all these issues one by one, obviously in theory, in discussion, not in the practical right now, given the time and everything. So we will be talking about what we can possibly do, how we can basically identify and how we can approach those issues, right? So now we are going to talk about vulnerabilities and cookie-based authentication. So next time, whenever you eat cookies, you will hack cookies as well. So this is a simple mind map. I know right now it's looking very small because of this is like just put in the slide. I'm going to show you it in my system itself right now. So there are like around 12 to 15 test cases, from cross-site scripting to sensitive data stored in the cookies to insecure deserialization, mass assignment. There are a lot of attack vectors that you might not have heard of, or you might have heard of, but you might have never tried in the cookies. And if you know already, that's really great thing. And if I am missing something, please feel free to add it on the comments or reach out to me on Twitter, so that we can make this mind map more and more better over the time. So in last couple of months, when I used to do bug bounties, I did a lot of research to basically increase the attack surface from a single attacking point. Okay, so what I usually do is I take one endpoint. Let's say I'll take, for example, a security header. Let's say there's a header called let's say X forwarded 4. Now my goal is to make sure that how I can basically use this particular header to maximize my attack surface, what I can achieve with it. I can bypass certain rate limit, I can try to bypass certain admin panels, I can try to use it for SSRF or things like that. Similarly, I got interested in these cookies because I haven't seen much attacks on the cookies or much reports around the cookies that I have done this from cookies, I have done that from cookies. There are a few reports talking about IDORs, talking about insecure cookies like missing flags and things like that. So I thought to do more research on it. So this is nothing new which I have invented. This is something that I have like searched, scrapped the whole internet to understand what are the possible attack vectors for the cookies. And this is what I present you right now. So let me quickly switch over to the mind map. I hope you are able to see it. And now let's just quickly have a look at various attack vectors. So we will look at it one by one, that how we can basically achieve different attack vectors. So the mind map is basically created by me, and I hold all the rights for it. The first attack we are going to talk about is the cross-site scripting. We all are aware of cross-site scripting. The one thing to remember over here, that most of the time the cross-site scripting in the cookies is self cross-site scripting. In bug bounty programs, there is no impact as such that we can observe with a self cross-site scripting. But when it comes to a pen test engagement, we have to ensure that we are reporting everything, and we are making sure that the client knows that whatever is happening in the application, right? So let's assume there is a parameter called name parameter which reflects back in the application somewhere, right? Let's say there's a particular profile section where it says welcome Harsh, and this name parameter is controlled by cookies. Now, what you can do is you can try to change this name parameters value in the cookies to some access payload. Let's say SVG onload equals to alert1, or some image SRC payload, and try to navigate back to this page and see if the access pop-up happens, right? If it happens, you have your self accesses over here. Now, the second question, how can I possibly increase the impact from self accesses to a good accesses? The answer is if you can do this with the CRLF injection, right? So this is one way, that if the application is vulnerable to a get-based CRLF injection, where you can send a user and try to inject an arbitrary cookie and replace basically this name cookie or something like that, or do something, or basically add some header injection using CRLF, you can still try to achieve a good accesses using the self accesses that you found in the cookies, right? So always look for the ways to increase the impact. There are a lot of ways to basically increase the impact, and all you have to do is to look a little bit deeper, right? Now, this is again something that everybody, I hope so, that looks for these days, that insufficient session management, that session usually doesn't expire on the server side or both the server side on the client side. When I say server side, let's say I logged out from the application manually, or the application automatically expired or timed out. From UI, I'm no longer able to basically, explore the application as authenticated user. But if I have captured the token somewhere, let's say in the burp suite or something somewhere else, I can use those tokens to again perform all the actions. So this is from the server side only. And when I say both the server side and the client side, it simply means that the even if I log out, or even if application manually logs out from the UI, whenever I navigate back to the UI, I'm still able to explore it as authenticated user. Similarly, there is another issue called long session expiry. So let's say your session is not getting expired after, let's say, 2 hours, 3 hours, or a day or two. This is again a security issue, because a lot of application like banking application or any application containing the user sensitive data should follow the sessions best practices. So another one is session doesn't expire on the password reset and the change. These are the issues which you can also find out in the other authentication mechanism, like token based authentication mechanism as well. In the concurrent session, this is not basically a security issue, it's more of a security best practice that you are allowing multiple users to log in on the same application with the same username at the same time, and you should not allow that. So this is most of a best practice, and we usually report it case to case basis. This issue is not of a consideration for the bug bounty program for those who bug hunters are attending this talk. So this is something which you should avoid reporting the bug bounty programs. Now, session fixation is itself a big attack, and everybody knows about session fixation. So basically, in a nutshell, an attacker tries to trick the victim user, basically, so that the victim user to use a session identifier which is known to the attacker. So attacker would try to forge a session identifier of himself and try to lure the victim, or try to trick the victim to use that session identifier to basically fix the session of the victim user, so that the now attacker can also try and see what if he is able to basically gain access of the victim user session. Now, there comes some one of the interesting attack, which is also we are going to talk about the real life case study, that the priv escalation, horizontal and vertical priv escalation is something that you can try to do. Let's say your application is using a multi-organization model. Let's say there is an organization 1, organization 2, organization 3, which are totally separate, right? And cookies are used to define that which organization a user can access. Let's say user Hirsch can access organization ABC, and user Hirsch B can access the organization XYZ, right? So this is defined by the cookies, let's say. Now, if there is a particular parameter which is defining this, I'll first try to alter that thing to see if my user can try to access Hirsch A can basically try to access the XYZ organization, which is actually accessible by Hirsch B, right? So all you need to do is to simply look at the cookies and the various parameters in the cookies. A lot of people basically don't pay attention to the cookies and the different parameters, and you should always like start removing cookie parameters one by one to basically see that what all parameters are required and necessary, and on all those necessary parameters start looking for the various attack vectors. This is something that really is helpful and will allow you to find a lot of security issues itself. Now, when we talk about vertical priv escalation, assume that the cookies are used to determine the role of the user. I have found this n number of times, like not really n number of times, but like a plenty of number of times compared to that, where the role is defined in the cookies, especially in the past few years, not these days that you will see it rarely. But like, let's say the role parameter is something which is defined in the cookies. You can try to alter that role parameter and try to see if basically you can elevate your privileges from a normal user to admin user, or a moderator user to some higher level user, right? Similarly, the lower users cookies can be used to access higher users cookies function, or try if similarly you can just replace the cookies and try to see if you can access those functions. It's more of a direct request, but yeah, you can still try it. Another one is the insecure direct object reference, the IDORs, the most famous and most interesting vulnerabilities for a lot of people, logical issues, access control issues, right? I am a big fan of IDORs, logical issues, missing access controls, and similar issues like that. So let's say your cookies are using some access defining parameters such as user ID. Let's say user ID is going in the cookies, let's say as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And what if I change it to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? If I'm able to access that user, this is simple IDOR to can help me to perform account takeover as well, right? Missing security attributes, this is something that I gave example in the start. So this is fairly simple, like HTTP only flag basically prevents this from stolen over. The scripting attacks such as cross-site scripting, this helps to be keep it secure so that it cannot be stolen over the unencrypted communication channel like HTTP or something like that. Same site flags helps cookies in a way that it prevents CSRF attacks. So yeah, this is really important, but this is not the only attack vector that you should look for. Now, guessable or weak cookies are simply like the cookies which are generated are not that secure enough. Let's say somebody is using base64 cookies, or somebody is using usernames MD5 hash or some weak hashing, and you can try to identify which hash it is, and you can try to generate like hit and try to see if you can basically bypass the authentication. And always make sure that a strong cryptography with the proper salting is used, so that cookies are more secure enough and you cannot basically crack it, an attacker cannot basically crack it. Now, when it comes to session puzzling, so this is a kind of a very new attack, and you can obviously find it on the WASP SKF security knowledge framework, that whenever an application utilizes the same session variable for multiple purposes, this can be abused by an attacker to trick the application and perform the action as an authenticated or privileged user. So giving you a simple example, let's say when you initiate a forget password request, the application generates the session token. What if this session token can also be used for accessing the dashboards page? This is a simple example given in the WASP security knowledge framework. Okay, so if you will go and explore this, you will get a really good idea about how basically things work in that terms. Okay, so you can also give it a read on this. My Learn 365 day 17 talks about the cookie-based vulnerabilities. I'll also share the link with you guys so that you can go and have a look about it. Now, this was something really surprising to me when I was looking and when I was reading this particular blog by this guy, that cookies can also be used to perform file inclusion. There are a lot of times when application uses cookies to call the files from the local system, right? And if those files are, let's say, header.php or something, let's say welcome.php is a banner file which is called by the application using cookies. What if I try to say .. etc password, or let's say I try to say .. footer.php or something like that? If I'm able to access that, this is a file inclusion. The scenarios are very rare. I myself never found this issue, but it's always good to check for. Maybe when you encounter such application which is using these kind of things, you might be lucky that day. Now let's move back to some other interesting attacks. Okay. So sensitive data stored in the cookies, there are a lot of times where I found that the application is using the base64 encoded data as a PI data, let's say your birth of date or date of birth, sorry, and your email addresses, your passport and something like that. And these are not secured by HTTP only flag. Now an attacker can use cross-site scripting to basically steal your sensitive information, like your PI information, like your mobile number, addresses and things like that. So make sure that these things are not stored in the cookies. Even if you do store, make sure these are encrypted properly so that nobody can decrypt them and can use them, right? Session donation is a kind of attack which is more of like you are donating your original session to the victim user, and then victim is basically logged in as your user. This is relevant when the application has some certain functionality where if I allow a victim user to log into my application, there will be some function which will execute and something will happen. You can go to book.hacktricks.xyz and try to know more about session donation attacks. I never found this myself as well these days, but I keep looking for such issues because you never know that when you will find something interesting. Now, cookie length violation. So this can cause buffer overflow. This can cause basically overflow attacks or can cause crashing in the application. According to the HTTP references, there are certain things. Every kind of server have their own cookie length, and there are lengths defined. And if you try to violate that cookie length, let's say there's a session cookie which is of allowed characters are like 10,000 characters long. A cookie can be 10,000 characters long, for an example. But what if I provide 10,010? What if I provide 11,000 characters? If the application crashes, this is a security issue that the cookie length measures are not implemented. And this is a lot of time I used to never check this issue because I never knew that this thing can be checked unless I explored this thing. So it's always good to explore and know these kind of things. Now, often there are some application like some PHP-based application that use serialized cookies or serialized objects, and you can always look for the insecure deserialization, and you can try to write your own scripts and things like that. And there is a simple lab kind of thing which is given on the Portsfigure Web Security Academy, which you can go and check out. Arbitrary cookie injection is something, the CRLF thing that we talked during the accesses, that if you can basically inject an arbitrary cookie and try to control things. it can result into a good accesses if you can turn the self accesses into good accesses, or it can be used to cause certain malfunctioning in the application, can cause to double cookie injection or try to bypass the authentication and things like that. So let's say application is using the cookies with a user ID 12345, but it's not vulnerable to IDOR, right? It is not allowing me to access 23456. But what if I inject the double cookies, and in the second cookie I allow the 23456, and the application now allows me to let me allow the access of 23456. This is a security issue again, indeed, and this should be always taken care of and should be always checked. Now, the denial of service or cookie bomb is nothing but forcing the server to process the cookie larger than the restricted cookie size. This is more of a similar as cookie length violation, just the more of same attack vector with the two different names. Cookies can also be used to perform SQL injection. This is a really nice blog by resource.infosecinstitute.com, and you can go and check it out to really have a good idea about SQL injection is cookie-based authentication. Again, to give you a rough idea, if there is some server-side interaction which is happening in the cookies, and if there is some values which are being called and which are being fetched dynamically or something, you can always try your luck for performing SQL injection over there. Now, mass assignment is nothing but more of a parameter pollution kind of attack. We'll see what parameter pollution is over here so that you will get a good idea, right? So let's say that the cookies utilize a parameter called user ID to retrieve some data of a user, or let's say allow you to log in with that particular user. Now, application is basically not vulnerable to IDOR, and changing user ID to something else will not help out to gain some access or basically elevate your access. Now, an attacker can try to add an additional user ID parameter like this, like user ID equals to attacker and user ID equals to victim. And now three things can happen over here. That application will allow you to retrieve the data of victim user using this ID if there is let's say application process the occurrence from left to right or right to left, depending upon that. Secondly, the application may retrieve the data of both the users, the user A, attacker, and user victim. And the application is not vulnerable and doesn't return anything except for just returning the attacker's data or maybe just giving some error. Similarly, in the mass assignment, what the attacker basically do is to try to inject the multiple user IDs in the same user ID parameter, right? So right now we are creating multiple parameters, multiple user ID parameters, multiple keys and multiple values. In mass assignment, what I will be doing is I'll be creating single user ID, and I will be creating an array, like let's say attacker, comma, victim, comma, Harsh, comma, ABC, comma, XYZ. So this is more of a mass assignment over here, right? So now there is an authentication bypass. Cookies are not validated. Always remove the cookies whenever you test an application. You can use authorize for it. You can use any other like auth metrics or something, auto repeater, which one you like the most. And just simply try to access the resource by removing the cookies and see if you can basically access it. Make sure that there is no headers like authorization header or no non-guessable headers are present, which are basically defining the access control or defining the authorization state. So yeah, if there is only cookies which are defining the authorization state, you should always check for this particular issue. Then there are some cryptographic specific attack like CBC, MAC, and ECB encryption, padding Oracle attacks. And the really great description is given over the book.hectic.xyz, and Pentester Lab has also some references around it. So make sure that you go and check it out. And so this is basically in a nutshell is a more of an attack vector when we talk about the cookie-based authentication. So I'll just give you a quick overview again, just to make sure that we haven't missed out anything. We started from cross-site scripting, talked about how we can convert the self-accessors into good accessors, insufficient session management, fixation, previous escalation, and IDORs. We talked about missing security attributes, guessable and weak cookies or weak cryptography in the cookies, session puzzling, file inclusion, SQL injection, session donation, session violation, and things like that. So basically we covered a lot of attacks. Initially where we discussed that there are a very few attacks, let's say just checking for the cookies attributes or just checking for the IDORs. Now we have like a bunch of attacks which we can go and check for the issues whenever we see a cookie-based authentication. So this thing is also can be found on this repository on the GitHub called Harsh Bothra / Learn365. So there is two things. This is the mind map which you can go and find over. All you have to just click over here. And also there is some notes on the cookie-based authentication vulnerabilities. Whatever we discussed, most of the things are also written over here. So these are the 21 test cases which you can basically perform whenever you see cookie-based authentication. Also, the mind maps link is there in this, and also there are some references which you can follow to make sure that you go beyond whatever is written on this particular page. And this is the mind map which you can go, this is available on the internet, you can go and access it. So this is basically about the various attack vectors in the cookie-based authentication. Now let's just move back to our presentation. So some real life case studies, there is really nothing much, but I'll talk about one or two case studies which will be helpful for you guys somewhere around the line. So there was an application, and I have talked about this issue in one of my talk called broken cryptography and account takeovers, where basically in the cookies there was a role parameter was basically sending the value in the format like, if there is a user with the lower privilege, it will send 00. If it is moderator, it's 01. It's manager, it's 11. It's admin, if it's a manager, it's 10, and if it's an admin, it's 11. So basically it's an this octal form, binary form, that 01 is like 1, 11 is your 2, and 10 is your 1, and 00 is your 0. So 0 to 2 is something which we basically talk about. So 0, 1 is 1, 10 is 2, 11 is 3. So basically 0 is the lowest user and the 3 is the admin user. So I logged in as a normal user. I noted that this is parameter which is going on. So what I basically did is I changed this 00 to 11, and I navigated the application's admin page, and I was successfully able to access it. Once I used to refresh, it will change the state back to the normal. I was not sure that why this is happening when I was not. So if you navigate simply, it will allow you to access. But if you will do a hard refresh, it will just give you back to your normal privileges. And then using the admin access, I was able to change the privilege of my lower user to admin user and gain a persistence access. This was a critical issue indeed, because there was no user interaction involved at all. I have also found during the pentest engagement the cookie-based accesses, which I use CRLF injection to turn into a good access, which I gave you example during discussing the findings. So there was a get-based basically injection, CRLF injection, which was allowing me to inject the arbitrary cookies. I just injected a double cookie, and this double cookie was also rendered. So it was like, hey, Harsh, and then the payload from the second cookies, and it executed the payload. Now it's good accesses. It was a reflect accesses. Cookies were not protected by HTTP only flag. We were able to perform session hijacking, and again, indeed, a high severity issue there. So these are some of the normal studies, case studies, quick case studies, that what you can achieve with chaining the issues. So never stop whenever you find a low hanging fruits, or whenever you find something which of medium severity, high severity, try to, even if it's a critical, try to see what you can do next. Let's say you found a remote code execution in a user session, try to pre-escalate to admin user if the bug bounty programs or pen test engagement allows you to perform a lateral movement, right? Try to see if you can map more and more systems out of it. Try to see if you can find more local vulnerabilities from a remote attacker's perspective, and try to see if you can get a good foothold in the network. So always make sure that no security issues are low, no security issues are critical unless you make them lower critical. So make sure that you always look for chaining the issues, chaining the vulnerabilities as much as you can. And yeah, this is the simple tips that I can give you, that whenever you look at the cookies, make sure that you look for how the session management happens, how they are handling the cookie generation. Is there any kind of role parameters being passed? Is there any kind of privileges parameters being passed? Is any kind of sensitive information in the cookies? Remove the cookies, check if it's accessible without authentication and things like that. So with this, this comes to the end of the talk, and I hope you enjoy this really short talk. And you can always reach out to me on the following channel. You can get in touch at my website, Twitter, Instagram, Medium. You can write email to me. I will try my best to respond at early as possible. And I'll be available at the Discord to answer all your queries. And yeah, thank you for listening to me. Have a nice day, and looking forward to see you guys in the very next conference. And have a, again, nice day. Thank you.